Welcome to Narration Tips. In this video, we will be discussing about what are arrays in general. And then in arrays, we have different types of arrays like single dimensional array, multi-dimensional array, and object arrays. And then we will be discussing about what is the difference between variables versus the array variables in general. So let's go into Eclipse, and here I'm creating a program, creating a class, and I would name it as arrays concept. So public static void main I'm selecting, click on finish button. So first, let's understand what are variables in Java. So when we are using variables, we can store one value at a time. So that's the purpose of doing with the variables. Now here, I'm defining a variable. Let's say int number. So what would happen behind the scenes? It would create one box. It would create a container. It would create a container, and the name for this particular container is given as number. And whenever we are writing this line of code, number is equal to 100, it would go and store this 100 in this particular variable. So this 100 will go and store in this particular variable. So here in variable we can store one value at a time. That's the purpose of doing for a variable. Now suppose if you are trying to store another value like this, it doesn't tell you, it will throw you an error because you can store only one value at a time. Now what if like I want to store more than one value in a variable? That's where we go with the concept of array variables. We can store more than one value at a time. So that's the purpose of going with the variables. Now under your variables there are different types of variables available. So we have single dimensional array, and then we have multi-dimensional array, and we also have the object array. And coming to this object array, it can be single dimensional or it can be multi-dimensional. So we will be starting with single dimensional array first, and then we will see how we can use this multi-dimensional and object array accordingly. So let me comment the code. Now there is a syntax of how to define a single dimensional array. So the syntax would be like this. So your syntax will be, first you have to say the data type, what type of data we are going to store. Then we have to define the variable name, followed with a square bracket, one square bracket is equal to new data type. So here you would be mentioning how many values you want to store. I would say rows. So in other words, how many values to store. So we would be calling it in terms of rows actually. So this is the syntax of your single dimensional array. Now suppose I want to store using this single dimensional array. I want to store 100, 200 and 300. So we are discussing how to store 100, 200 and 300 in this array concept. So these are of integer. So I'm going to say my data type is going to be integer. That's about your data. And then we need to provide the variable name. So give any name. So I'm going to give the variable name as numbers. Open and close the square bracket is equal to new. Again the data type will be integer. I want to store 3 values. It will be 3. So here it is giving me a provision of storing 3 values in this particular numbers variable. Now your array index will start with 0. So here I am writing array index would start with 0. So this is applicable for all these arrays. So in any of these arrays, your array index usually would start with 0. So now when I am starting storing the values, numbers of 0 is equal to 100. So what will happen whenever I write this line of code? Int numbers is equal to new int of 3. So behind the scenes, Java will create one box and the name for that particular box is given as numbers, and this box is divided into 3 partitions. This will be partition 0, this will be partition 1 and this will be partition 2. In other words 1, 2, 3. And the index of array is starting with 0, 0, 1, 2. Now in index of 0 I would be storing 100, in index of 1 I would be storing 200, and in index of 2 I would be storing 300. So taking this as a base, numbers of 0 is equal to 100, numbers of 1 is equal to 200, numbers of 2 is equal to 300. So here I can store 3 values. This is how I can store. Now suppose I want to know the length of my array. So here there is a method called .length method. Method is used to find the number of values stored in a array. Okay, so now what I'll do, I'll go here. I want to know how many values are stored in this. Through programmatically I'm going to say numbers dot length. So this numbers, whenever you type numbers dot length, here if you see, this will return me an integer value. That means it will tell us how many values are stored. So what I can do, as this is returning me an integer, I'll go to the beginning. I will define a variable called int. I'm defining a variable called array length is equal to. So now I am printing here system.out.println. So here I am going to say number of values in array is plus, I'm going to concatenate this. And if you run this program, it should display 3. Okay. So now if I want to print the value which is stored in index number 1, I need to write a code like this: system.out.println numbers of loop. So this would print the value 200 as an output. Run the program, it will print 200. Now suppose if I want to print the value stored in index number 0, so here I can say numbers of 0. And if I want to print the value stored in index number 2, I need to say numbers of 2. And if you run the program, it would print 100, 200, 300. So rather than writing separate lines of code like this, as I want to print the values which are stored in this variable, as I need to perform the same step again and again, I would go with the concept of for loop. This is what we have learned in the previous videos. So what I'll do, I'm going to write a for loop, iterate over array, int I is equal to 1, I less than 3, and I plus plus. And here I would say system.out.println numbers of I. So how this program would work: first I value is 0, 0 less than 3, it will increment your I value by 1. So here I value is 0, it will go and print 100. Now I value is 1 less than 3, condition is still valid. It will increment your I value by 1 more, which will be 2. It will go and print the value which is stored in index number 1. Now I value is 2 less than 3, condition is still valid. It will increment your I value by 1, which will be 3. It will go and print the value which is stored in index number 2. So if you run the program, 100, 200, 300 is printed. Now here we are hard coding this number. Suppose here if it is 5, and here we need to change it to 5. So rather than hard coding this, as I need to run until this particular number, which we are able to get with this particular method, I will give this variable here. Now it would go and print the values accordingly. Now the output, when we run the output would be something like this. So 0 will be 100, 1 will be 200, and 2 will be 300. Now here it is 5. It will have 2 more boxes. It will have 2 more boxes. And the index number for this box will be 3, and the index for this box will be 4. But I stored only 3 values. So by default here, it will return or it will display as 0 and 0. So you are defining your array length as 5, but you are storing only 3 values. Wherever you are not storing any value, by default it will be taking it as 0 and 0, because the default data type for integer is 0. Now if you run the program now, it would print as 100, 200, 300, 0, 0. So in array we can define the length more, but you can store less values. It will give you 0 and 0 if you are not storing anything. Suppose you are defining the array length as 2, so 0 and 1, but you are trying to store more than 2 values. In this case, it will give you an exception, which is nothing but an error, array index out of bound exception. So why it is displaying array index out of bound exception is, now your array length you have defined as 2. That means it will create a box, and the name for this particular box is given as numbers, and this is divided into two partitions, so which is nothing but 0 and 1. Now this 100 is going and storing in index number 0, and this 200 is stored in index number 1. Now there is no third box, to store that 300 value, due to which it is throwing this exception. So in array you can define your length more and you can store less values, but you cannot define your length less and store more values. It will throw you this exception, which is array index order bound exception. So this is about a single dimensional array which we have discussed for integer. Now suppose I want to define a single dimensional array and I want to define it for a string data type. So with the string data type, I want to store different type of courses what we have, like manual testing, automation testing, API testing. All these three values I want to store. Now I am defining a data type of string and the variable name. Course names, single square bracket, is equal to new string, and I want to store 3. So I am giving the number as 3 here. So behind the scenes what will happen? It will create a box, and the name for that particular box is given as course names. And this is divided into 3 partitions. This will be your first partition, this will be your second partition, and this will be your third partition. And the index, as it starts with 0, 0, 1, 2. And here I want to store in index number 0 manual testing. So this manual testing will go and store here. And automation testing it will go and store here. And API testing it will go and store here. So to do this, I'm going to say course names of 0 is equal to manual testing. Course names of 1 is equal to automation testing. Course names of 2 is equal to API testing. Now if I want to print all the values, I would write a for loop. So I is equal to 0, I less than course names dot length will give you this length I plus plus system dot out dot println course names of I. Now if you run the program, it would print manual testing, automation testing, and API testing. Now suppose in string array you have defined your array length as 5. That means you are saying 5 rows I want to store, but you stored values only for 3 rows. So what will be the default type for string? It will be null and null. So the default return type for integer is 0, and the default return type for string is null. So this is how you can store in array of single dimensional array. Another thing is, now you are seeing it as a string. You can store only string values. You are seeing it as a string, you can store only string values. If you are planning to store of some other data type, let's say here, I want to store integer, it will throw you in. So as you have defined the string data type, you can store only string values. If you are trying to store some other value, some other data type, it will throw you error. Place your cursor. Type mismatch, cannot convert from int to string. Cannot convert int to string. So what if like I want to store different values of different data types? So it is not possible with this, right? So let's see how we can handle that. Let me say API. So this is how you can store of string data types. Okay. So now let's say you want to basically store of double data types. So here we are discussing about double array. Double, I will say numbers or mileage, open and close the bracket, is equal to new double. So open the square bracket. So here I want to store two values. So now I will start storing the values of double. So mileage of 0 is equal to 10.3. Mileage of 1 is equal to 8.9. Like this you can store. And again, if you want to print all the values, you will be getting the length and all this stuff. So this is how you can store of double data types. So this is all about a single dimensional array where we are able to store of similar data types. So in the single dimensional array, we can store values of same data types. So now to handle of multiple data types, how to store. Let's say I have my personal details. I want to store my first name, last initial, which is of character. First name is of string, last name is of character. Let's say the mileage of my car is nothing but the double value. The salary that I am making it per month is nothing but an integer value. Suppose if I want to store true or false value, all these different data types, how we can store. So to handle that, we have a object array. So we are discussing about object array of single dimension. So let's go here. Now syntax of object array. So the syntax of object array will be, we will say object space, give some variable name, details. So here as per syntax it will be variable name is equal to new object. How many values you want to store? Let's say I want to store 5 values. So this will be rows. This is the syntax. Now I want to store the details like this. Nourish. I want to store my last emission. I want to store the mileage that my car is giving. I want to display my salary, or I want to display how many hours we have in a day. Let's say 24. And something called true or false. All these data are of different data types. So now to store of different data types, we are going with object array. Let me go here. Object, provide a variable name, That's where I'm giving details is equal to new object. How many values I want to store? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here I would say 5. Now details of 0 is equal to nourish. Details of 1 is equal to G. Details of 2 is equal to 10.2. Details of 3 is equal to 24. Details of 4 is equal to 2. So here it is accepting of any data type. Now if I want to print all the values, again the logic would be same. You will write a for loop. Use index on array. I is equal to 0, I less than details dot length I plus plus. So here I am going to say system dot out dot println details of I. So even in object array, the index will start with 0. Even in object array, if you want to know how many values are there or what is the length of your array, we will use dot length method. And here, if you run the program, it will print nourish G 10.2 24. And again, suppose here you are defining your number of values that you are going to store as 7, but you stored only 5 values. What it will print? It will print something called null, because object is also of a string kind of thing, where the default data type for object is null. So these concepts are pretty much same for single dimensional array or object array or multi-dimensional array. This is all about your object array of single dimension. Now how the multi-dimensional array will look like. So here so the syntax of multi-dimensional array is you need to say the data type followed with a variable name, two empty brackets is equal to new data type. So here in the first bracket you will specify the rows, and in the second bracket you will specify the columns with a semicolon. Now I want to store let's say so there are I want to maintain the user details in this array, and let's say I have a details like username, password and confirm password. Username, password, confirm password. I want to store for 2 people, or I want to store for 2 users. So what I'll do, I'm going to go here, I'm going to say string, because username, password and confirm password is a string data types. String, I will give the variable name as user details. Two empty brackets is equal to new string. I want to store for 2 users, which will be 2. So 2 rows, and I want to store username, password, confirm password, which will be 3. So 2 rows and 3 columns. So when I write this line of code, behind the scenes, it would create one box and the name for this particular box is given as user details. And it is divided into two partitions. So here number of rows is 2, and it is divided into 3 columns. So this is column 1, this is column 2, and this is column 2. So this will be 0th index, this will be first index, this will be 0th index, this will be first index, and this will be second index. So in this 0 and 0, 0 and 0, so the username is stored, let's say, and in this 0, comma 1, password is stored 1, 2, 3, 4. 0, comma 2, 0th row and second column, just 1, 2, 3, 4. Now first row and 0th column, we are going to store for the second person, let's say 1, comma 1, 1, 1. So we are going to store the password ABCD 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, comma 2. So first row and second column, we are going to store the confirm password ABCD 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I will start storing the values accordingly. User details 0, 0. I am going to say Naresh. User details 0, 1, 0, 1. Test 1, 2, 4. User details 0, 2. Test 1, 2, 3. Now for the second row, let me copy this. I'll do the changes accordingly. So it will be first row 0th column, first row 0th column, which will be Kumar. First row, first column, which will be ABCD 1, 2, 3, 4. First row, second column, first row, second column, which will be the confirm password ABCD 1, 2, 3, 4. So now, if I want to print the rows and columns value, so here it is a multi-dimensional array. We need to write one for loop for rows and second for loop for columns. So I am writing the same for loop, use index of array. To get the length of this particular row, I am saying user details not length. So this will give me the number of rows. I want to get the number of columns. So for that, I am writing another for loop. This is called nested for loop. One loop within another for loop. To get the column length, I am writing another for loop index on array. J is equal to 0, J less than user details. So here user details will give you the length of this. User details dot length will give you the length of this. But how do I get the column length? To get the column length, so here in bracket you are going to say 0. So in the square brackets I am going to say 0. So to get the column length, I am giving in bracket 0. This will give me the column length. So how this loop will work? First, I is equal to 0. I less than 2, where condition is valid. It will increment by 1, where your I value will be 1. Now your cursor will be in the first row, ideally. So now it goes into the column. So j is equal to 0, j less than 3. Condition is still valid. j plus plus, it will increment by u. So where is the current position of Java? It is in this particular form, because this particular loop has to run for 3 times. This particular loop has to run for 2 times. That's what it is doing. So this loop, the outer loop is running for 2 times and the inner loop will run for 3 times until that condition will become to 3. It will run for 3 times. So now here I am printing system.out.println user details. Here I am going to say I and then j. So now if you start executing the program, it will print Naresh test 1 2 3 4 test 1 2 3 4, but the output is printed in some other format. The reason is every time after you print the first value, you are asking to go to the new line. So system.out.println will make you to go to the new line. But I don't want to send to the new line. I want to print Naresh test 1 2 3 4 test 1 2 3 4 in one row. So here, after printing the first value, next to that print the second value, next to that print the third value. That's what I'm saying, system.out.print. Now once this loop runs for 3 times, because this loop has to run for 3 times, to print this, and this. 1, 2, 3 has to run for 3 times. Once it runs for 3 times, this for loop, it will come out of the for loop here. Here I am saying system.out.print. So if you run, you can see Naresh test 1 2 3 4 test 1 2 3 4, Kumar ABCD 1 2 3 4 and ABCD 1 2 3. So this is how your multi-dimensional array would be in Java. And your multi-dimensional array can be of object also. So let me show you a multi-dimensional of object array. Again, as per the syntax, it will be object variable name 2 empty brackets is equal to new object. Here you will specify the rows and here you will specify the columns. Suppose I want to store, let's say for 2 users, the details like I want to store the first name of a person, which is Naresh, last initial, which is G, the mileage that car is giving 9.2, and the number of hours 24, and for the second person Kumar, young, 3.7, 24 fox. So for this I will be using object array because it is of different data types. So here I will go and I am going to say object variable name, let's say details, 2 empty brackets is equal to new object, 2 rows, 3 columns. Sorry, it's not 3, 1 2 3 4 5. So now here details 0 0, that's where I am going to store Naresh. So 0th column, 0th row, 0th column, 0th row, first column, 0th row, second column, 0th row, third column, 0th row, fourth column. This is what I need. So now I will start storing the second value, 0 comma 1. 0 comma 2. So here I'm storing double value 9.3. 0 comma 3, I'm going to store integer which is 24. 0 comma 4, this is for this. Now for the second row, I'll just copy this, do the changes accordingly. 1 comma 0, 1 comma 1, 1 comma 2, 1 comma 3, 1 comma 4. So where here it will be comma, and here I'm storing m, and here I'm storing 3.7, and here I'm storing 34, and here I'm going to say false. Now again you will use a for loop to get the row length. You are using another for loop to get the column length. So to get the column length, in bracket it will be 0. Now as I need to print everything in the same row, system.out.print, and here I am going to say details of 0, sorry, details of I and j. So this loop will run for 5 times. First column, second column, third column, fourth column, fifth column. It will come out of the for loop after it print all the values of the first row. Now I am asking Java to go to the new line, where it will go to the new line. Now it will start iterating for the second row, where it will print for 5 values. If you run the program here, you can see Naresh G 9.3 24 true, Kumar M 3.7 24 false. So the reason is, as I am not having any space between one value to other value, everything is printing next to each other. So what I'll do here, I am concatenating with empty space. So this will basically provide a space between narration G and 9.3, 9.3 and 24, 24 and 2, where your output will look neat and clean. So run this. So one last thing is, when do you go for array variables? When you know how many values you want to store in a single variable, that's where you go with the array variables. Okay, again, to highlight, whenever you know how many values to be stored in a variable, that's where we go with the array variables. That's where you know the length of your array variables. Alright, thank you for watching. See you in the next video.